When the search submersible's light first found the ruined restaurant, silence fell over the mothership, as if the ocean had stopped breathing. For nearly a century, the wreck lay wrapped in darkness. The camera's beam revealed a fragment of another life. The scene was not theatrical. No chandeliers hanging in perfect suspension, but a series of collapsed planes and a scatter of objects that, together, suggested a room once arranged for people to eat and talk and unwind. Initial reports were technical. Sonar returns, precise coordinates, compass bearings, and depth figures. Yet the live video translated those numbers into a human tableau. Plates, some whole and others in pieces, glinted in the glare. A service trolley lay overturned, its casters frozen in a mid-turn by decades of sediment. Small things mattered, more than grand gestures. The bent rim of a spoon, tiny fragments of glass, a curled edge of a menu caught in silt-dot explorers treat such scenes with a studied quiet. The ROV reduced speed to avoid stirring settled silt. Thrusters whispered. Manipulator arms stayed clear until mapping was complete. High-resolution photography and three-dimensional photogrammetry recorded every angle before any object was disturbed. Teams compared the images to original ship plans and archival photographs to reconstruct the restaurant's likely arrangement. Recovering artifacts from 2 miles below the surface is neither simple nor inevitable. The decision to lift an object is weighed against conservation realities and ethical considerations. Many items remain where they rest, left as part of an underwater gravesite. When recovery is undertaken, it is deliberate and slow, contained. Lifts, immediate desalination steps, and controlled stabilization to prevent rapid deterioration on exposure to air. Conservators on the support vessel work in shifts, cataloging, photographing, and beginning the slow process of treatment. One small ceramic plate became emblematic of intimate history. It was unassuming, slightly chipped, its glaze crazed by time, but its printed border provided a crucial clue. In a dim library on the deck, conservators compared the mark to shipping company catalogs and period photographs and began to place the plate in context. The object's manufacturer and pattern hinted at a class of dining habitual to the ship and, by extension, at the social rituals that once took place in the room. The physical state of objects told another story, the slow arithmetic of decay, where metal pitted and softened into oxidized lace, where wood fibers gave way to a sponge-like mass permeated with mineral deposits. Marine organisms colonized surfaces in their own classifications, encrusting barnacles, tube worms, growths that hung like drapery. These biological layers both obscured and preserved. Some items had been sealed beneath silt and were remarkably intact. Others had been exposed and were skeletal beyond the mechanics of recovery. The discovery raised immediate ethical questions. The Titanic is a grave site, a place where more than 1,000 lives ended. Family members, historians, and museum curators argued about the propriety of removing personal effects. Some advocated for preservation in situ, using imaging and data to educate without plundering. Others argued that objects brought to museums could serve a powerful educational and commemorative function, giving tangible form to stories that otherwise risked abstraction when told only through numbers and dates. Restaurant itself offered unexpected insights into everyday life aboard the liner. The layout suggested a space designed for privacy and comfort, a place where passengers who could afford a à la carte service retreated from grander public rooms. Service routes, evidenced by the location of a dumbwaiter shaft and the remains of a service door, revealed how waiters moved unseen behind guests. Luxury here was careful choreography of discreet attention, silver patterns of moderate elegance and well-made furniture intended for frequent use rather than display. Material. Traces hinted at tastes and routines. Tea staining on a saucer suggested a morning ritual. A smear of sticky residue on a tray could be the remains of fruit preserves from a breakfast service. Conservators treated these traces like fingerprints. Chemical analyses of residues, where possible, identified foodstuffs, adhesives, and varnishes, placing a culinary texture onto the archaeological record. Together with menus preserved in archives on land, the recovered artifacts help reconstruct a sense of daily life and menu variety. The small domestic choices that define a table as much as any headline course. The public reaction to images of the restaurant was complex. Some viewers were mesmerized by the ordinary domesticity preserved at depth, a dining space for ordinary comforts, now framed by the extraordinary context of loss. For others, the images provoked unease, a discomfort at seeing places of private life rendered into museum artifacts. Exhibitions that displayed recovered items attempted to navigate this tension, pairing objects with careful interpretation. Timelines, passenger records, and first-person accounts that anchored each plate or fork in a human biography whenever possible. Scientific value and human emotion met in the reports produced after the expedition. Engineers described corrosion rates and the structural collapse that had shaped the wreck's present anatomy. Marine biologists cataloged colonizing species and measured how life had established a new ecosystem on the man-made structure. Historians and curators annotated lists of recovered items with names and origins, where possible identifying owners through passenger lists and letters. Each discipline brought a vocabulary that, when combined, produced a fuller narrative than anyone could supply alone. Long-term stewardship remains the central challenge. The ocean is not static. Corrosion accelerates, currents shift, and climate change may alter deep-sea conditions in ways not yet fully understood. Conservators and international bodies have had to imagine strategies that respect the site and the people it commemorates, while allowing for study that deepens public understanding. Digital preservation, high-resolution three-dimensional models, virtual tours, and online archives has become one way to share the site widely while limiting physical interference. At the same time, physical conservation efforts continue, their costs and techniques a subject of ongoing refinement. The expedition also highlighted technological leaps that made such discovery possible. Modern deep-sea vehicles are the heirs of decades of engineering experimentation, pressure-resistant hulls, fiber-optic telemetry, and highly sensitive imaging systems that render texture at centimeter scale. Sonar mosaics stitched together like aerial maps allowed scientists to navigate a landscape of ruin and to prioritize areas for close inspection. On deck, data specialists worked with software that could layer historical plans on current imagery, revealing correspondences that guided rove pilots and archaeologists alike. The human dimension of the expedition followed the technical. Crew members spoke of a peculiar humility that comes from working at scales both vast and intimate. A room that once hosted leisurely conversation, now rendered as a cluster of objects that demand careful testimony. Family descendants participated, where possible, offering memories and letters that enriched the context of recovered items. Curators curated not only objects, but narratives, constructing exhibitions and digital stories that emphasize dignity, memory, and education over spectacle. At its most poignant, the discovery of the restaurant reconnects us with ordinary lives, suddenly interrupted. A space designed for the small reassurances of daily life. A warmed plate, a familiar chair, the company of others, survives in fragments, a testament to human routines that persisted even aboard the most modern ships of their time. In photographs and mapped sequences, the room invites reflection, the idea of home, of service and supper, of minor daily acts that become history when severed from continuity. The expedition ended with the same mixture of technical detail and human reverence with which it had begun. Logs and maps were filed, artifacts that could be conserved were cataloged and stabilized, and raw footage was archived and distributed to scholars and the public. The restaurant, a small human space at the heart of a vast wreck, became, through images and objects, a focal point for renewed conversation about how to honor sites of mass loss while learning from them.